I've never thought of myself as the suspicious type. I don't go through phones, I don't count texts, and I've never once used the word trust as a we asterisk p asterisk n. I always believed that if you had to snoop to know where you stood, you probably already knew. That kind of thinking used to give me peace, until the night Emily came home wearing another man's scent. It was a Friday, late, closer to 1 a.m. Then midnight. I was dozing off on the living room couch with the TV humming something forgettable in the background, volume barely above a whisper. I didn't expect her to be early, but I also hadn't expected to stay up this long. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Not with the way my gut had been twisting since she texted, "Be home soon. Love you, Red Heart." That text, it was off, polished, too composed, like it was written for me, not to me. Emily's normal texts were fast, messy, full of abbreviations and half-formed thoughts. This one read like a quote from a greeting card. The front door opened quietly, like she was trying not to wake anyone. But I was already up, barely pretending to sleep, waiting. She said softly, like she was testing the water. I stayed still for a beat before shifting, rubbing my eyes for show. "Hey," I mumbled, sitting up. "Late night?" She walked in with that careful grace she always had after a few drinks. Heels soft on the hardwood, scarf still around her neck even though it was warm inside. Her coat hung lazily from her arm. Her makeup was still flawless, and her smile was tight. "Yeah, corporate thing. You know how it is, those after-party drinks that never end." She set her purse on the counter a little too quickly, like she wanted to be done with this conversation before it started. She leaned over to kiss me on the forehead, and that's when it hit me. Cologne. Not mine. It wasn't subtle either, it was strong. Spicy, woodsy, expensive. Not a scent you pick up in a passing hallway or from a quick hug. It was the kind of smell that lingers when you've been close. Really close. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at her scarf. It was navy with a faint checkered pattern. One I'd bought her a couple Christmases ago. On the edge near her shoulder, I caught a faint smear of lipstick. Wrong shade. Emily always wore mauve or berry tones. This one was red, bright, like it belonged to someone else. She walked past me into the kitchen and started pouring herself a glass of water. I heard her rummaging through the cabinet for something, maybe just stalling. That's when it slid out of her purse. A hotel key card, black and gold, embossed with the name of one of those riverside boutique hotels downtown. Clipped to it were 2 breakfast vouchers. She snatched it up so quickly it almost looked rehearsed. "What's that?" I asked quietly. "Huh? Oh." She forced a laugh, too light to be real. "Some dumb prank. One of the girls must have dropped that in my bag as a joke. You know how Rachel is." Rachel wasn't there tonight. She blinked. There was the slightest hitch in her breath before she recovered. "Right, I meant Lacey. God, I'm tired." I stood up slowly, not to int asterisk mid-8, just to make her look at me. "Emily, you said this was a corporate party. Who was there?" She didn't answer right away. "Just the usual crowd. You know, the sales floor, some upper management, everyone." I glanced toward the kitchen counter. 2 wine glasses stood next to the sink, both half full. One stained with coral lipstick, the other with red. We hadn't opened wine. Not tonight. Not last night either. "You were home before you went out?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "What?" she replied, confused. "Those glasses," I said, gesturing to them. "Were you here before the party?" Her expression twisted like I just accused her of a crime. "Seriously? You're tracking my wine glasses now?" I shook my head. "No, I just don't remember you coming home between lunch and now." She didn't respond. Instead, she pivoted to her default defense, outrage. "This is what I mean," she said, voice rising. "You're always watching, always doubting. Every time I step out, you think I'm doing something wrong. It's exhausting, Michael. I can't breathe without you turning it into a crime scene." That one landed. I felt it, because the way she said it was sharp and heavy, like she'd been waiting to use it. "I just asked about the key card. And I told you it's nothing. Just a prank." God, why are you always so suspicious lately? Lately? She threw her hands up. Yes, you're constantly checking up on me, questioning everything. You say you trust me, but you don't act like it. I stared at her for a long time. My heart was racing, but not in anger. More like heartbreak in slow motion. I wasn't accusing her, not directly. I was asking, giving her a window to be honest. But instead, she went on offense. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. There was no Michael, I swear. No, please believe me. No hand on my arm, no tears, no shame. Just blame, deflection, accusation. You think I'm being controlling because I asked why you smell like cologne and dropped a hotel key on the floor? Oh my God, she muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. I can't do this tonight. I'm tired. I had 2 glasses of wine and a cab ride home, and suddenly I'm on trial. She picked up her phone and started walking toward the stairs. I'm done talking. Good night. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-full glasses like they might explain something. One had my fingerprints, the other didn't. The smell of that cologne was still hanging in the air. I picked up her scarf and brought it to my nose, and for a moment, I wished I hadn't. The scent was unmistakable, int asterisk mate. Foreign. I held onto it longer than I meant to, not because I wanted proof, but because it felt like the last thread of something I used to recognize. I put the scarf back on the hook by the door. I didn't sleep that night, not because I had evidence, but because I'd finally stopped denying what my gut had been telling me for months. She was hiding something, and she was really, really good at it. I wish I could tell you that was the only time something felt off. That one night, one scarf, one scent was all it took. But that would be a lie. The truth is, the signs were there for months. They just started whispering before they ever had to scream. It began with her location sharing. Emily and I had that feature turned on for years. Not because we were tracking each other, but because it was convenient. Picking each other up after work. Checking if the other was already home before grabbing dinner. Just small things, the kind of tools that quietly fit into a marriage. But one Thursday, sometime in late March, I noticed her dot was gone. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. I even texted her about it. Her response was so casual it didn't even raise a flag at the time. Oh, I turned it off by accident when updating the phone. Didn't even notice. It didn't seem malicious. And honestly, I didn't think much of it. Not then. But that was the first string pulled. The second? Her girls' nights. Emily's always had a tight-knit circle, college friends, work friends, a few childhood ones who stuck around. They'd meet up a couple times a month, grab drinks, maybe catch a show. Totally normal. Until one night I checked our bank statement. Not out of suspicion, just doing my usual budgeting, and I noticed a charge from the Wexford. The Wexford isn't a bar where Emily's friends hang out. It's a sleek, riverside place tucked between luxury condos and law firms. More a fair in progress than ladies' night. What caught my eye wasn't just the place, it was the timestamp. 11:47 p.m. That night, she told me she had gone home early because her friend Lacey wasn't feeling well. I stared at that line item for a long time. Not because I had proof of anything, but because I suddenly couldn't stop replaying her voice in my head. The hesitation when she said it. The way she took longer than usual to answer that night. The way she dropped her purse and went straight upstairs, saying she was exhausted and just needed a shower. After that, I started noticing the chargers. Her phone charger used to live on her side of the bed, plugged in next to a little ceramic tray she kept her earrings in. Then, randomly, it vanished. I assumed it was lost, but the next day, I noticed it was gone from her work bag too. Then again on the weekend. She started taking it with her every time she left the house, as if her phone dying for even 5 minutes might be catastrophic. I asked about it once. She laughed it off. I just keep forgetting to leave it. I've got 3 of them anyway. She didn't. She had 1. And then there was her phone itself, always face down. Always locked. Not just password protected anymore, but facial recognition only. She used to let it sit on the counter when she cooked, text rolling in with memes from her sister or reminders from her coworkers. Now, it was practically glued to her body. She used to leave her laptop open too, working late into the night, half watching shows while answering client emails. But over time, something changed. Now, every time I walked into a room, the lid snapped shut. Once, I asked her what she was working on and she said, "Just billing." But she closed the screen anyway. When I pressed a little, she gave me that annoyed sigh, the one that made me feel like I'd asked something offensive, even if all I wanted was to feel included. She also stopped wearing her ring. I noticed it for the first time during dinner at my parents' place. She kept fiddling with her hands, almost like she was trying to hide something, and it wasn't until we were back in the car that I realized the band wasn't there. When I asked about it, she shrugged. It didn't go with the outfit. I said nothing, but I felt something crawl under my skin. The way you feel when someone closes the door a little too fast behind them. I started taking mental notes after that. Not because I was looking for a reason to be suspicious, but because I couldn't pretend not to anymore. She had a new perfume too, something citrusy and sharp, the kind of scent that catches you mid-sentence. She never wore it around the house, only when she left for meetings or client lunches. I asked her once if it was new, and she smiled like I'd caught her doing something cute. "Yeah, you don't like it?" she asked, playful. I said I did, but it wasn't for me. Her wardrobe changed next. She used to live in jeans, cozy sweaters, flats, practical, understated, familiar. Lately it was pencil skirts, silk blouses, heels too high for just another client intro. Once I joked she looked like she was heading to a fashion shoot. She didn't laugh. She said, "I like feeling confident. You should try it sometime." The jab stung more than I let on. Emily had always had a sharp tongue when she was stressed, but this was different. There was venom in it, dismissiveness, like she had started measuring me against something or someone else. Then came the work trips. They started popping up on the calendar with little notice. Just a quick thing in Milwaukee. Only overnight, back before dinner. But she'd leave on Thursday and return late Friday night, and when I checked the location history on our shared home assistant app, which at one point we both forgot was even on, it didn't match up. One night she said she was at a Marriott near O'Hare. The device registered her smart speaker in a residential neighborhood on the other side of the city. I didn't confront her. Not then. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I wasn't sure I could handle the truth if she gave it to me. Instead, I buried it. Deep. I smiled through dinners, kissed her goodnight, and told myself it was all in my head. That marriages go through rough patches. That maybe I was being needy or insecure. But the space between us kept growing. My voice got quieter. My presence smaller. I started hesitating before speaking, unsure which version of her I'd get. The distracted one with excuses or the cold one with the defense ready. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. At this point, I was still in mourning. Not for our marriage, but for the version of it I thought we had. I still wanted to believe in her. In us. But belief is a fragile thing when it's running on fumes. And somewhere deep inside, I started to grieve someone who was still sleeping next to me every night. Someone who laughed at my jokes but wasn't really hearing them. Someone who kissed me goodbye in the morning but forgot to look me in the eye. I used to be her favorite person. Now, I felt like a roommate who paid rent in affection she didn't want anymore. So I waited, watched, tried to remind myself of the good days. Tried to be better, more attentive, more patient, less suspicious. But all I found was silence. A woman who used to tell me everything now barely spoke unless she had to. Her laughter, her stories, her weird little observations about life. They were all reserved for someone else. And I knew it, even if I couldn't prove it, even if I didn't want to, even if part of me was still praying I was wrong. But the thing about instincts, they don't need permission to tell you the truth. They just wait for you to listen. There's a moment when doubt stops being theoretical, when the quiet gnawing in your gut turns into something you can't explain away. A shift, a snap, something that changes the way you look at every conversation, every phone call, every kiss goodnight. For me, that moment came the night of her company's gala. She'd been talking about it for weeks. Not to me, really more like around me. It was one of those annual corporate things. Rented ballroom, overpriced appetizers, lukewarm speeches. Normally, I went, played the role. But this time, Emily insisted I stay home. It's mostly internal this year, she said with a shrug. Plus, it's really just for clients. You'd be bored out of your mind. That was the first lie. She forgot I'd been to these galas before. I knew the guest lists weren't private, and spouses were always encouraged to show face. But I didn't argue. Not right away. I just nodded, smiled, and told her to have fun. But I'd already decided I wasn't sitting this one out. I made one phone call. Sarah Nolan. Sarah was the wife of Emily's boss, Ryan. We weren't close, but we'd spoken a few times at company events. Just enough for me to get a read on her. Sharp, quiet, always watching. She answered after 2 rings. "Michael?" she asked, surprised. "Hey, sorry to bother you," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Listen, I just found out Emily's skipping the +1 thing at the gala. Is that normal this year?" There was a pause. A long one. "No," Sarah said finally. "Ryan told me it's a full formal with partners invited." "Why?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. Sarah exhaled sharply. "You think something's going on?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think we're going to find out." We agreed to meet outside the River North Hotel around 7:45 p.m. just before the program started. I wore a charcoal suit that still fit, even if it didn't feel right anymore. As I pulled up, I saw Sarah already standing near the entrance, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "You sure about this?" she asked as I stepped out of the car. "No," I replied, "but I need to be." We didn't go in through the main lobby. Instead, we circled around through a side entrance near the service corridor, one I knew employees sometimes used. It led straight to the ballroom floor through the back kitchen. We slipped in without much notice. 2 ghosts in a room full of glitter and wine. The ballroom was packed. Music, chatter, clinking glasses. Everyone looked polished, rehearsed. Emily stood near the center of the room in a midnight blue dress I'd never seen before. Elegant, tight at the waist, the kind of dress chosen for someone else's eyes. Ryan was next to her. And I don't mean standing casually. I mean leaning in, close enough that their heads touched when they whispered. Close enough that his hand brushed her back and she didn't move away. They looked like 2 people playing a game only they understood. I felt something sour rise in my throat. Sarah stood frozen next to me. Her expression didn't change, but her body did. Her hands clenched. Her jaw tightened. We didn't say a word. We just watched. And then it happened. Ryan looked at Emily. She nodded almost imperceptibly. They both stepped back from the circle of conversation and walked toward the side elevator near the lobby doors. One labeled VIP access only. They didn't rush, didn't sneak, just peeled away like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned to Sarah. "You coming?" She didn't speak, just followed me. The elevator was glass on the outside but blacked out from within. We watched as the doors closed behind them. I hit the button, but it didn't respond. Restricted keycard access. Of course. Sarah muttered something under her breath I didn't catch. The front desk clerk was young, maybe mid-20s, trying too hard to look busy behind a computer screen. I walked up and said calmly, "Hi, my wife and her boss just went up to the executive floor, but I think they may have left something downstairs. Could you call up and check which room they're in?" She gave me a standard, polite smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but the VIP floors are." Sarah stepped in, her voice sharper than mine. "We're both spouses. This is a matter of company accountability. You can either tell us what room they're in, or we'll have the board hearing about this tomorrow." The clerk paled. 2 minutes later, a catering staff member met us in the hallway. A young guy with a name tag that said Luis and eyes that darted between us like he knew a secret he wasn't supposed to tell. "I'm not supposed to say anything," he whispered. "But I saw them go into room 1702. It's a private suite. No other guests allowed up there tonight." "Did they say why?" I asked. Luis hesitated. Then, "They were laughing. said something about catching up, but they locked the door behind them. That was all I needed to hear. We didn't go up. We didn't need to. Instead, we returned to the ballroom and waited. Took 22 minutes. 22 minutes before the elevator dinged and the two of them walked back in. Laughing. Smiling. Rehearsed. Emily's hair was slightly tousled. Ryan's tie had been readjusted badly. His collar was twisted. Then Emily saw me, and the color drained from her face like ink in water. The music didn't stop, not immediately. But something did. Conversations paused. Glasses lowered. Sarah stepped forward, arms crossed, and for a split second, Ryan froze too. It was all there, in their expressions, in the weight of silence between the notes of the music. You can't walk back a moment like that. I walked toward Emily, slowly, like I was approaching a stranger. You left your scarf at home, I said quietly. Thought I'd return it. Her eyes glistened. Michael, don't, I said, voice flat. Not here. Not now. Sarah turned to Ryan, her voice louder, more cutting. You've humiliated me, and if you think this gets buried, you're dumber than I thought. No one clapped. No one laughed. There was just this terrible, stretching silence where even the band seemed unsure what to do. Emily looked around the room like she'd just woken up from a dream and found herself naked in a crowd. I saw the panic, the regret, the desperation. But none of it looked like love. Not for me. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't yell. I just turned and walked out. Because some truths don't need to be screamed. They speak loudest in what you don't say. I didn't go home right away after the gala. I drove aimlessly through the city instead. The skyline glinting off the river like 1,000 cold eyes. The streets were almost empty, and every red light felt longer than the last. I had no destination in mind, just motion. Somewhere to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't shatter completely. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was nearly 3 a.m. The house looked different somehow, like it was holding its breath. The porch light was still on. Her car was parked in its usual spot. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I didn't slam the door. I didn't stomp through the hall. I moved quietly, methodically, like a man packing up a crime scene that belonged to someone else. Emily wasn't home yet, or maybe she was and decided to sleep somewhere else. Either way, the silence pressed down on me. All our photos were still on the walls. Our wedding day at the courthouse, the trip to Maine we took 5 summers ago, her parents' backyard barbecue where she spilled wine on my shirt and laughed until she cried. Each one felt like a photograph of strangers wearing our faces. I walked upstairs to our bedroom and stood in the doorway. Her perfume still lingered on the sheets. Her side of the bed was neatly made. She hadn't been home since before the gala. For a second, I almost sat down, but something in me resisted. That bed didn't feel like mine anymore. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. Not a dramatic suitcase or anything that screamed, "Final exit." Just a bag big enough to hold the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, a few keepsakes. Things I could grab without thinking too hard. I moved slowly, folded each shirt, packed each item with a kind of quiet ceremony. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. Downstairs, the kitchen was lit only by the glow from the fridge. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. That's when I saw the small desk in the corner. The one where Emily used to write thank you notes after holidays. This drawer was half open. Inside were a few loose envelopes, some pens, and a stack of blank stationery. Without really deciding, I sat down and pulled out a sheet. I didn't write an accusation. I didn't write about Ryan, about the elevator, about the hotel. Those details didn't matter anymore. Not to me, not in that moment. What I wrote instead was something else. Something that had been living in my chest for months, maybe years. I wrote about how I'd been disappearing. First, my laughter. Then my voice. Then even the thought that I would miss her if she left. I wrote about how I used to wait up for her, used to look forward to her coming home, used to feel like we were on the same team even when things were hard. I wrote about how I tried God, how I tried to believe her excuses, to hold on to the good memories, to tell myself it was just a phase. I told her that the night at the gala wasn't the reason I was leaving. It was just the last nail in a coffin she'd been building for years. Not out of malice, maybe, but out of neglect. Out of the slow erosion that happens when someone stops seeing you and starts treating you like furniture in their life. I didn't sign it love. I didn't sign it goodbye. I just signed my name. Then I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it in the desk drawer. The same drawer where she'd once kept our wedding invitations. Back upstairs, I grabbed my bag and took one last look at the room. I didn't take everything. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand. Left the framed photo of us from our first road trip. Left the scarf I'd given her that Christmas. Those things belong to someone else now. I moved through the house one more time, turning off lights as I went. Each click felt final. The living room went dark. The hallway, the kitchen. When I reached the front door, I hesitated, my hand on the knob. For a moment, I thought about leaving a note somewhere obvious. But the letter in the drawer was enough. She'd find it. She'd read it. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it didn't matter. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. My car sat in the driveway, engine still warm from my earlier drive. I tossed the duffel bag in the back seat and slid behind the wheel. I didn't look back at the house. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't. The drive was quiet. No radio, no calls, no destination. Just the road and me. My mind was strangely clear, emptier than it had been in months. I thought I'd feel rage, heartbreak, some violent kind of grief. Instead, I felt hollow, like a room that's been emptied out but still smells faintly of what used to be there. When I finally stopped, it was at a gas station off the interstate. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, headlights illuminating the edge of the woods. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel, at the faint indent where my ring used to be. The skin was pale there, like a ghost of the life I'd been living. I didn't know where I was going yet. Maybe to a friend's house. Maybe to a hotel. Maybe just to keep driving until the sun came up. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. Not to the house. Not to the excuses. Not to the version of myself that had been quietly disappearing. I shut off the engine and leaned back, closing my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't despair. It wasn't hope exactly, more like a strange, tentative freedom. Because leaving isn't always about slamming the door. Sometimes it's about slipping out quietly and letting the silence do the talking. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the car, not in the motel room I eventually checked into around 5 a.m. Not even when exhaustion wrapped around my shoulders like a weighted blanket. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying every conversation, every odd detail, every time I'd second-guessed myself when I should have trusted my instincts. By sunrise, I was already planning. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about rage. It was about clarity, about finally letting the truth catch up to the lies. If Emily wanted to tell her version of the story, fine. But I'd make sure mine was undeniable. The first thing I did was lock myself out. Digitally. Bank accounts, shared streaming services, cloud storage. Anything we'd once merged in the name of convenience, I severed. I wasn't petty about it. I didn't change her passwords or delete anything. I just removed my name from the accounts and started over, piece by piece. Felt like peeling myself out of a shared skin. Then I went for the hard stuff, her laptop. I knew the password. She hadn't changed it. It was the same one she'd always used. A mix of our anniversary date and her old cat's name. She once joked it was the one thing she'd never forget. Because those are the two things I'd never lose. That felt ironic now. I waited until I was sure she'd be at work, then drove back to the house. My key still worked. The silence inside was heavier than before. It was obvious she hadn't been home. The lights were off. Her bag wasn't on the kitchen counter like usual. Even the wine glasses were still in the sink, untouched. I went straight to the office. Her laptop sat where she always left it. Closed, plugged in, humming softly. I powered it on and waited, nerves buzzing in my fingertips. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. I just knew I'd find it. And I did. Not buried. Not hidden. Just scattered in plain sight. Emails. Calendar invites. Hotel confirmations. Some to her work address, some to a private Gmail account I didn't recognize but guessed had been in use for months. There were reservations to restaurants I'd never heard of. Some in cities she'd claimed to be visiting for client meetings. Others closer to home, just far enough to avoid running into anyone we knew. There were photo attachments, too. Nothing explicit, but int asterisk mate in their own way. A picture of a wine glass with a city view behind it. A cropped image of her dress on a hotel bed. A selfie of her and Ryan at a rooftop bar. Faces close. Expressions relaxed in a way I hadn't seen from her in a long time. But what mattered most wasn't just what she said. It was what she left unsaid. In a folder buried under project files, I found a text file titled Jill_speaking notes. Inside were bullet points for a presentation she had supposedly given at a networking event. Only, the timestamps showed it had been edited from a hotel IP address in Milwaukee the same night she told me she was staying late at the office. Lie. After lie. After lie. I created a folder on the desktop and labeled it plainly. Read me. Inside, I dropped the receipts. Not everything, just enough to form a timeline. Travel records. *TS of bank statements. GPS history from our smart home app. I made sure everything was dated, backed up, and in order. Then I encrypted her client files. I didn't delete them. I couldn't do that, not without crossing a line I didn't want to touch. But I added a layer of encryption she'd have to work for. Nothing malicious. Just a simple password gate. One she could crack, technically. But the passphrase? It was the title of my favorite book. The one she'd always rolled her eyes at. The one she once called too slow and depressing for anyone with ambition. She'd never remember it. And if she did, maybe she'd finally realize that the man she dismissed as boring had been watching everything unravel in real time, and chose not to stop her. Before I left, I pulled out the fireproof safe in the closet. I had stored a lot in there over the years: birth certificates, insurance papers, a backup hard drive. This time, I added something else. I printed 3 audio transcripts. Snippets of voice memos I'd stumbled across accidentally while syncing her old phone to our home server months ago. Back then, I'd brushed them off, thought they were work recordings, reminders, but they weren't. One was her talking to someone, probably Ryan, about how Michael just doesn't get it anymore. Another was her laughing, saying, "He still thinks I'm going to that retreat next weekend. He's so predictable." The third was short, quiet, but final. "Ryan understands me in ways Michael never could. I don't even feel bad anymore." I printed them and slid them into a manila envelope, then placed it in the safe with a sticky note that said, "In case you forget what you traded." I stood there for a moment, staring at the safe. Not with hate, not even sadness, really. Just the kind of quiet recognition you get when you realize someone's been gone long before they ever walked out the door. Then I left. I didn't slam anything. I didn't write a dramatic message across the mirror or throw a box of her things in the yard. That wasn't who I wanted to be. That's never who I'd been. Instead, I walked out the front door, closed it gently behind me, and left it exactly as she'd left me. Quiet, functional, and missing something essential. Later that night, from the motel, I sent her one message. "There's a folder on your desktop you should read. I didn't lock you out, just left you with the truth." She didn't respond. Not that night. Not the next day. But I know she read it. Because at 4:23 a.m., the login attempt for the encrypted folder failed 3 times. And at 4:24, she tried the password. My favorite book title. She got it wrong. The truth unraveled fast. HR launched an inquiry. Key clients paused contracts. Sarah filed a formal complaint. Emily's name became a quiet warning at work. Her reputation, once spotless, now whispered through hallways. The encrypted client files? Untouchable. She couldn't spin it anymore. Not with the evidence, the silence in the house, or the man who finally stopped defending her. I moved to a quiet coastal town in Maine. Found peace in routine, books, the sea, and my own thoughts. Emily stayed behind, her world in pieces. She tried to recover her client base, But the password, the one thing she never cared to remember, kept it locked. Trust, once broken, remained out of reach. I didn't hate her, but I didn't miss her either. We both chose, and only one of us learned how to let go.